Everyone. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name's Isaac Wilson, Councillor for Wheatwood and Chair of the Board. We will just start, I think, before we do introductions, with a minute's silence for Mahalia Franz-Meer, who many of you will have known, almost all of you would have known, I suspect, as a friend and a colleague. So let's just have a minute's silence now before we start. Okay, thank you. Okay, as I say, welcome to this morning's meeting. We'll just start by doing introductions around the table, please. So, starting on my left.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Pauline Graham, Crossgates and Winmore Ward.
Good morning, all. Councillor Sharon Hamilton, Moortown and Meanwood Ward.
Good morning, Craig Timmins, Councillor for Carvely and Farsley.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Tom Hinchcliffe for Bramley and Stanley.
Good morning, Councillor Lisa Martin from Roundhay Ward.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Andy Parnham and I'm Councillor for Armley Ward.
Good morning, Tim Rollett from Strategy and Performance Service.
Good morning, I'm Caroline Barrier. I'm the Director for Adults and Health.
Morning, Andrew Byram, Chief Digital Information Officer.
Morning, Nicola Illingworth, Deputy Head of HR.
Good morning, Emma J, Deputy Head of HR.
Good morning, Lisa Culver, Head of Health, Safety, Wellbeing and Fire.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Andy Dorman. I'm the Assistant Chief Executive with responsibility for people and digital.
Hello, everyone. I'm Victoria Bradshaw. I'm the Assistant Chief Exec for Finance, Trade and Resources.
Morning, Mariana Paxton, Deputy Chief Executive.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Deborah Cooper, Exec Board Member for Resources and Deputy Leader, Leeds City Council.
Good morning, Councillor David Blackburn, Farnley and Wortley Ward.
Good morning, Conrad Hartbrook, Councillor for Rothwell Ward.
Councillor Neil Buckley for Old Woodley Ward, substituting for Councillor Stevenson.
Good morning, Billy Flynn, Councillor Radden Wharfdale Ward.
Morning, everyone. Rob Clayton, I'm the Scrutiny Advisor to the Board.
Thank you. And Rob, as Scrutiny Advisor, could I ask you to go through items number 1 to 5, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just the procedural items we take at each meeting. Item 1 is appeals against refusal of inspection of documents, and there are no appeals today, Chair. Item 2 is exclusions of the press and public, and there are no items that fit that criteria today, Chair. Item 3 is late items, and there are no late items on today's agenda. Item 4 is declarations of interest, and I'll just ask any members to declare any under Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct. I'll just pause briefly. That's none, Chair. And then item 5 is apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Stevenson, with Councillor Buckley attending as a substitute, and also from Councillor James Lewis for item 7 on the budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We now have the minutes. we have a couple of items, matters rising, which I'll ask Rob to talk through. But does anyone have any questions or comments on the minutes? Otherwise, could you just, yeah.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Wilson. Yes, just a couple of matters arising. Minute 52, which was the procurement strategy at our last meeting in November. There was a request that that be brought back to the board, and that is in the works now, with an expectation that it will come in February, with potentially a further follow-up in March as well. And then minute 53 was a request for an update on the early resolution approach. I've discussed with colleagues in HR, and that is also planned to return in this municipal year, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So on the agenda item number 7, we have the scrutiny of the budget proposals, and included within that item, members have sight as well of the financial health monitoring report. So I think we'll have 15 to 20 minutes presentations and then time for question and answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just wait for Rob to do the presentation. So, as the Chair said, we're going to cover the 25-26 financial position that was reported to Executive Board, and then an overview of the budget, the provisional budget that went to Executive Board.
Sorry, Victoria, could you just pull the mic a little bit closer, please? Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. Good job as top on that. And then in the changes that we've received since the impact of the provisional settlement, and then where we are on the budget gaps, and then Mariana and Caroline will run through the council plan savings. Okay. So the on to the next slide. The latest position that went to Executive Board was that we had an overspend of 28 million, which is down from the previously reported position at November. However, that is the reduction is due to the start of implementing the mitigations around balancing the budget, so we started to bring those into the position. There are significant risks within the budget still, so if we just move on to the next slide, Rob, please. There are pressures around demand-led pressures within social care, so both children's and adults. And the winter period, was really important, especially around the adult social care area, where we've had payment runs 10 and 11 now, which has put risk around that position. We've also got the children and families, the children looked after, and on external residential. However, we are seeing the reductions in the numbers that we're expecting to get us to the final proposals, and some have been highlighted within the report. However, the majority of those are being delivered. The risk areas are around adults and children's, where there were savings proposals around those demand-led budgets, which is making those very challenging. We have brought into this position all the social care reserve and some of the strategic contingency reserve, and the remaining amount of the strategic contingency reserve will be utilised in the next report to Executive Board. But we have retained general fund balances at the moment at the level which we set them at 36.4 million. However, it is looking like we will be using some of those, and we have provided for the replenish of those within the provisional budget that went to Executive Board in December. To recognise the challenging position that we've got in year, we have strengthened the financial controls that we've got in place, and we've put in a spending review of all purchase orders and purchase cards above £500. That's been implemented, it's been in operation for a couple of months, and we are seeing a number of approvals coming through, some that we've rejected, some that we've asked for further information on. The biggest thing around that is the change of behaviour, where people are questioning before they're putting in a requisition to the spending panel, but we are capturing the outcomes of that. From the 5th of January, we also implemented 2 other areas around overtime and agency, where they are being reviewed by the Financial Challenge Group, and also new contracts. So where we're going into new contracts, we're looking at those, the extensions and exemptions, to make sure that they are in line with value for money, and also the requirements the specification meets our requirements. All new grants that are being received by the council are also being reviewed to make sure that we've made sure that we can identify any budget that we're currently incurring that can be used against those grants in line with the eligibility of them as a first part before we incur any additional spend. The outcomes of those will come through the financial monitoring reports, which we'll be bringing to Exec Board in February and then March. The in-year spending panel controls that were put in place, we asked a number of questions as part of that, which is getting people to really think about what they are spending, why, how they ensuring they've got value for money. But I won't dwell on that because we've got a lot to get through this morning. So moving on to next year's budget, 26-27 and 27-28 and 28-29. There's been a fundamental change in the provisional settlement and how the funding local authorities are receiving has been allocated. It's a real complex piece of work. So the 4-block funding model hadn't been reviewed since 2006-07. We updated the data in 13-14, but this is the first time that the way resources are distributed to local authorities has been changed. There's been a number of complex methodology within there, with new announcements around the index of multiple deprivation, etc., which has meant forecasting what we think we will receive very challenging. We've also had the business rates reform, which has meant that all the businesses within the city have been revalued. We've had multipliers increased from 3 to 5, which has meant the amount people pay has significantly changed. And then there are transitional arrangements around that, which we've had to get our heads around to try and model what we think the council will receive. And on top of that, there's been Section 31 grants, how we received those, which was compensation for those reliefs, mandatory reliefs that were put in place in historic years. They've now been paid in a different way. So it is a complex position. Therefore, our estimate when we went to Executive Board was that we would have a net revenue position of 726.06 million. That's an increase on the net revenue budget of just over 70 million. This was following the announcement of the provisional settlement on the 17th. This was before the announcement, on the 17th of December, and I'll go through the impacts of that. That meant that we'd get revenue support grant of 39 million and that we would be additional 39 million, and that we would increase our funding through council tax and business rates, 41 million through council tax and business rates increase of minus 14 million. So it's a significant amount of funding that we receive locally. That 726 million is shared between the directorates, and we can see that there's been an increase in both the adults and children's directorate budgets to reflect the demand pressures that they're receiving through the year, and that we spend 64% of our budget on social care, which is a significant element. So moving on to the next. We had a budget gap when we went to September Executive Board with the medium-term financial strategy of just over 101 million. We've done a review of that, taking into consideration the additional resources that we got through the fair funding review, and also a review of the assumptions within that budget around the level of pressures. That reduced the budget gap to around about 39.5 million, and those new savings that have been put forward within the pack to go forward to full council have been included in the papers today. So as I said, on the provisional settlement on the 17th of December, we received confirmation of the 3-year settlement. We got the outcomes of the fair funding formulas, and there was 30 grants that were moved into revenue support grant, and that's to simplify funding streams, but it took a lot of work to estimate what those were, what was considered in the budget, and where we thought those would be repaid. And then, as I've said, we've had the business rates reset. So at this point, we were projecting that we'd have additional resources in 26-27 of 30 million, increasing by in 27-28 to 37 million, and in 28-29, 38 million. And we got further details on some specific grants, the homelessness and the Family First grant. There were additional pressures that were identified since we went to executive board. So we've noted the pressures that are coming through in adults that we're seeing through the monitoring. So we've increased the amount over and above what we put in at a December executive board. We've also reviewed the areas of the budget, including staffing, and increased the provision in those areas. We've looked at the council tax base now that we've done the return for central government and had to increase the tax base. And we've also worked through the West Yorkshire Pension Fund reduction in the contribution rates, which reduced from 15.7% to 12%. We do fund some of our staffing through grants that we receive in capital schemes, and the benefit of that reduction at 4.5 million will be to those areas. And then also we've looked at to replenish reserves that we will have used in 25-26 to balance the budget, and they've been taken into consideration since the exec board in December. So those updated assumptions meant that we'd got an increased net revenue charge of 101.28 million. That we'd increased the pressures that were in directorate budgets, and also the savings that needed to be delivered down to 57.9 million. We can see from here, this next slide, that these are where the allocations of the budgets are across the directorates. And in adults and health and children's and families, you can see that we've put in substantial amounts around demand and demography increases, with adults and health budget increasing by 52.5 million and children's and families by 26 million over the period to reflect the increases that we've seen come through in this financial year. There are still key risks in the budget around demand and demography as we track through and forecast, but it's very challenging, the complexity of the people that require our support, and also the changes that we're seeing in the trends that have come through in this financial year. We're mapping those through. We're also obviously got unknowns around the impact of cost of living on our residents and the unknowns around inflation. And those same pressures are being reflected in the dedicated schools grant and also in the housing revenue account. So for closing the gap, we had the new council plan for 26 to 2030, where we're looking as an organisation to reshape and reset the council. And there was 4 key themes from those, which will cover organisational effectiveness and also prevention in more detail in a moment. But we had revenue growth and locality working. Alongside that, we did have directorate savings that we undertook to ensure that we're in this transition period as moving into the new council plan approach. So very quickly on the ring-fenced budgets, just so I leave enough time to go through those effectiveness and the prevention side. The dedicated schools grant is in 4 separate blocks, and the high needs block is where we're seeing the pressure. We got over 1 billion of funding for dedicated schools grant, but we are still seeing those pressures within the special education needs area, which is causing overspends in that area. As we can see from the next slide, the dedicated schools grant is in deficit. We do have a statutory override where you can keep that deficit on the balance sheet as a negative reserve. It is the only account that you're allowed to do that for. That statutory override will come to an end in 27-28, and therefore that deficit would hit the revenue budget in 28-29. We are waiting for government reforms on that. We're not unique. Every authority has got pressures within the dedicated schools grant. And therefore that white paper will be key on how we'll resolve this position. As I said, in the housing revenue account, they're grappling with the same assumptions that we are within the general fund budget. But the key points from the housing revenue account that rent increase will increase by 4.8% and service charges at the same rate. Pay, we've assumed the same at 3.5%. and then we will be uplifting our budget for repairs as 3.6 million. We are waiting for the announcement around the rent conversions. If that does come through, an extra £1 per week on that would generate 2.5 million, and £2 a week would generate 5 million. There is a huge capital programme within the housing revenue account, and this is around our housing growth, the repairs and maintenance, and also the high-rise projects. It's very quick on the main points from the budget report. We'll move on to the savings. So in strategy and resources, there are business as usual savings which are being undertaken. Firstly, in City Dev, there's the asset management and regeneration, which is where we're looking at rent reviews, transforming the way that we recharge for externally funded programmes. In strategy and resources, people and business support, we're looking at the extension of a closed loop system around our mail and print, and we're looking at efficiencies around administering the additional voluntary contributions that staff make to make that more efficient. And then in CL in fleet, we're looking at reductions in our where we subcontract out our repairs. The cost of our parts, we've looked at whether we can get better value for money using other contracts, which we've done, and we've also increased the working hours of our team so that they work shifts into the evening, which means that our vehicles don't have to be off the road during the day when services need those vehicles. And that's generated in 26-27 814,000 of savings. Okay. So I'm now going to just move on to Mariana around the organisational effectiveness cross-council savings.
Thanks, Victoria. I'll cover this one quickly, Chair. There's some new things in here, but there's actually quite a lot of things that Scrutiny Board are already aware of and have been involved earlier. So there are 9 aspects to this. 3 of them generate more savings. More specifically, the others are enablers, and the bottom 2, customer strategy and core business transformation, are things that are already well in train. But it's important that we see them in this context so that when we're communicating and engaging with staff and with managers, then people can see things in the round. The ones I'll pick out particularly are the ones that have got savings attached to them. So that's the second bullet point. We've talked at this board before about simpler, flatter structures, more standard spans and layers. We've had some work done by an external company to kind of benchmark, provide insight, and we believe there are some savings to help us improve productivity within that. It will be challenging, but the numbers of colleagues affected wouldn't be huge, and probably would be, less than, for example, our turnover, even when taken together with all the other savings in here. The second one I would pick out is the attendance management, which we've got a dedicated item on this later under the Be Well at Work. But again, this is, and you can see from the performance report that's also on today's agenda, we are higher than we want to be, and especially in some service areas. So this is just recognising we need to go, further and faster in that. And then again, the other one that I would pick out is the kind of automation, digital, and including AI, but not to dwell too much on AI. And again, we've got a session on some of this in February as well on the usual annual IDS focused session. So those are the 3 that more directly will deliver savings. But just to pull out one other, the first one, the service planning and appraisals. We've got quite a good track record on appraisals. On service planning, as staffing reductions have been made, we have not had as structured an approach to service planning, and we actually think it will help with prioritisation and responding to some of the workload challenges we get through the staff survey. So that's something we are going to be pushing quite hard, is a more standard approach to service planning. And I think you've all seen the action plans in response to the staff survey, where we've just got a quite clear 38, which is a more manageable number than thinking about a service plan for the hundreds of services that we deliver. So taken together, we believe that this programme of change, which is emerging rather than absolutely developed as yet, we're trying to attach capacity to it as we go, and we want, to deliver around about between 9 and 10 million probably on this in 2026-27, with then increasing amounts in the subsequent 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just 3 or 4 slides on the prevention demand management programme. So this is around absolutely changing the way that we work across the council, and our vision is very clearly about transforming that our ways of working to support people to live independently and quite resilient lives, and to reduce their need for council funded support by what we call a prevention focused model of working, and the difference being that individuals and families are provided with sort of holistic support, which is across their life course and involves us working in a much more multidisciplinary way across our different directorates and the different ways in which we work. The next slide pretty much takes you through what the objectives are. If you could just bring them all up, please. Thank you. So, the really strong emphasis is around changing the way that we're working in the council, and the objectives are so that we reduce demand for people, for children and families, by having a much more proactive front door, a very responsive and early responsive front door, and also how we use our family hubs and our community hubs that are already in existence, but use them in a way that supports around a person and their family, their needs. It's also about reducing the number of children that are currently receiving external placements, trying to get them home, back living with their families wherever possible. And those children that are defined as being on the edge of care, making sure that we're supporting them so that they don't hit crisis and have to end up in more costly external placements. We also want to look at how we can reduce the number of people that are presenting as homeless. Again, not waiting for that crisis to happen, but identifying individuals at risk of homelessness, individuals and families, and providing support to enable them to live in sustainable long-term housing. For adults in health who require social care support, really trying to focus on reablement principles, and that is very much embedded in the Care Act around reduce, delay, prevent, really trying to work with those individuals to get them home if they've had an episode in hospital, try and avoid them needing to go into a residential or nursing placement by offering whole person support to keep people living independently in their own communities. And the next slide also shows some of the outcomes. So from a people's perspective, from children and families, their own perspective, so that they are supported to live independently wherever possible. And sorry, mixing up my slides. People are experiencing better outcomes themselves, so that they're not getting support too late in the day, that we're working with them, we're identifying them through what we call risk stratification, those individuals and families that are most likely to knock on the council's door, not in the next month or so, but actually much earlier, identifying them much earlier through what we call risk stratification, and offering them support, including offering access to community support through our third sector organisations who are already out there delivering quite a lot of care and support. Next slide, please. So there are 2 main buckets here. I call them buckets. Basically, they're quite significant and sizable elements of the prevention programme. The first is those children, families and individuals that are already accessing services. And this is around what we call managing current demand. And this is to realise savings and draw out savings in the next financial year, 26-27. So this is the individuals that are already in our system, trying to support them to get them out of more expensive, costly placements and get them home with the right sort of support, and support their risks from escalating even further. And then the other element is around sort of targeted, what we call targeted prevention and early help, really identifying, as I say, people that are at risk, children and families that are at risk much sooner than when they actually come to us, and offering them a sort of much more holistic support, including sort of preventing breakdown in terms of homelessness and housing, and using sort of data analytics and risk stratification to work with those individuals. This programme is mainly a cross-council focused piece of work, but of course we don't operate as an island and in isolation. We work across our system, across education, schooling, across health care, and this is about making sure that we're offering all sorts of support with our partners as well to stop those risks from escalating further. For example, stopping children, supporting children to remain in education, for example. So, really sort of whole person approach. That's basically those slides, but very happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I appreciate from all of our speakers that there's a lot to get through there as well, and it's always the case with budget items that it covers everything we do, really. Could you just turn your mic off, please, Caroline? Yeah. So thank you for that, and hopefully members have been able to read the papers as well. I'm going to ask a couple of quick questions and then go to members. So, Andy, I've got you. Councillor Parham, got you up next. Just a couple of quick ones. Mariana, please, could you just very briefly explain to me what service planning is, and then one for Caroline. I think I saw that we had an 11 million increase in adult social care demands since the budget. Could you say if that affects our forecast around what we can expect to save through prevention in the next year or two, please? So Mariana.
Sure, yeah, thanks. I think service planning most simply is described as the bit that can help join what we're trying to achieve as a whole organisation through to what each individual can contribute. So at a service level, it's taking, the context that service is operating in nationally, the legal context, etc. Any digital changes, any workforce changes, any savings that have been made, any investments that is being made in those service areas, making sure that plan responds to staff survey feedback, and that the KPIs and service standards that service is challenged to meet are in there, so that then monitoring can take place on the contribution, and that can be used as a really positive engagement. It's not that we don't do service planning. Some services still do it and do it well, but we don't have a consistent approach, so we don't have that really clear kind of top to bottom alignment and vice versa. Does that make sense?
Thank you very much. So what we can see very clearly around demand in adult social care is the trajectory, because of the demographics, our ageing population and complexity of need. We are profiling and we are seeing quite a significant rise in demand over the next few years. and also cost pressures related to inflation. So the majority of the services that we commission for adult social care are delivered by independent external organisations who are experiencing quite financial challenges in terms of terms and conditions and pay for their workforce. So those pressures we know will continue. The 11 million that is going to be added to the adult social care budget will help to mitigate and or at least fund some of those demand pressures. Without the prevention programme, we know that we still won't be able to live within that allocated budget. So the prevention programme ensures that we can contain our spend within the allocation, which would include and cover the 11 million. Without a very, very active prevention programme, we know that through the demographic data that we look at, through the trend data that we look at in terms of numbers of people receiving care and support and the length of time they need in care and support, it will exceed our budget that includes this 11 million as well.
Thank you. Sorry to just dwell on this, members, for a moment, but I just want to be clear. The 11 million extra is 11 million we're putting into it to help solve these challenges, etc., rather than an additional 11 million in demands, as it were, between the budget and now. Just want to understand that.
So no, it is to account for our increasing demand. So this 11 million pounds will cover what we are anticipating our costs to be from the start of the next financial year because of our existing commitments. The prevention programme will make sure that we don't find ourselves in a position that we're in this year where our overspend continues to get worse month on month because we're covering existing demand commitments.
Thank you. Okay, I understand that. So I've got councillors Parnham, Buckley and Timmins. And again, just raise your hand. And yeah.
Well, it's a question for Caroline. So thank you for your report and your presentation. And can I just say thank you for everybody, all officers who helped rehouse Armley Helping Hands in their new, shiny and lovely home. It's very kind of everyone involved. My question is about the Enhance programme. So quite related to what the chair was just saying. So Enhance obviously gives additional support for those coming out of hospital and reduces costs because the costs are incredibly high, aren't they, for residential places. I've seen it in action as a trustee of Armley Helping Hands and as a ward councillor in Armley, where we've got a high level of frailty, falls, etc. There's a lot of people who I see, elderly people, who could really do with a support worker, one-to-one support worker, and obviously Enhance being such a fantastic service and being delivered by the neighbourhood network. I'm wondering whether this 11 million does it retain and build on Enhance, and is there an element of support work that can be incorporated, that additional support work?
Thank you very much, Councillor Parnham. Really helpful observations and comments. The Enhance programme is funded by the NHS. It's funded by Leeds Community Health because what we find is that there will be some people who are going to hospital and coming home and not having immediate support, and it draws on the services that our neighbourhood networks are already providing and other third sector organisations to really target who they work with, and it is individuals, as you say, who come back out of hospital and just need a little bit of support. The council provides that sort of funding, but it does it through the neighbourhood networks. So we spend £3 million allocated to neighbourhood networks to do exactly that. Some of the neighbourhood networks do operate a support individual one-to-one basis, but not all of them by any means. It's much more volunteer based and outreach based. But the philosophy and the approach of the Enhance programme is exactly what we're commissioning from our neighbourhood networks and other third sector organisations that we fund.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Buckley, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions, if I can. The first one was about business rates, and I asked a similar question at my regular scrutiny board the other week, or last week actually, and that is that since the budget, there's been a lot of controversy about the hospitality sector and how it's affected by business rates and so on. And the Chancellor of the Exchequer said that she was going to go away and work out a package which would support that sector. In other words, presumably have them paying lesser business rates. And I just wondered whether this will mean that Leeds would therefore receive lower business rate. So that's my first question. And secondly, one of the objectives on the slides was to reduce the number of people who present as homeless. And that was interesting to me because I've had recent experience of a friend's son who became homeless, and it's a long saga. But I just wondered how you intend to do that, because of course these things are complex. And as Ernest Hemingway said about something completely different, these things happen gradually and then all of a sudden.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair. On the business rates, if there was any announcements around the hospitality sector where they'd get further relief, the councils are compensated for that loss of income through what's called Section 31 grants. So we would see a compensation if it's a mandatory relief that the government put in place. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Buckley. The question around trying to reduce the number of people, there will always be some individuals who, for unknown reasons, will hit a point in their life very, very quickly and very suddenly where they find themselves homeless. But then there's also a large number of people who the way that they live, the environment they're living in, presents potential risks, and the intention is to stop working with people at crisis point and we're identifying people who are more prone and more likely because of all sorts of their life factors, who might be at risk at some point, and it might be due to domestic abuse, it might be drug and alcohol related, who are likely or potentially more at risk of becoming homeless. And working with those individuals, they might not even currently be known to the council, but identifying those individuals early and offering them support through our third sector organisations, who we fund through quite significant numbers of grants, but change the way we work so that we support them to prevent that risk occurring where they do become homeless. We know from experience in other local authority areas where they've done this, taking that sort of very proactive and early approach actually does reduce the number of those people who hit crisis and need accommodation, emergency accommodation, because of reaching a crisis point.
Just briefly, if they're not known to the council, how can the council identify them?
Thank you very much. That's where we know that through using information that is readily available. It might be sitting already with community organisations, it might be with GP practices. It's identifying information and pooling information which shows those people that are, those communities, those individuals, those cohorts that are likely to be at risk. that won't capture everybody by any means, and there will be people that are not known to us and suddenly need support from us. But there are a greater number, a larger number, who we know will be at risk. So even if they haven't received services from the council or approached the council before, if they're known through third sector organisations, community organisations, we would be able to offer, and it doesn't have to be the council that approaches individuals and families or provides that support. It could be through their communities, through their social interactions, where they are signposted very, very early on to any sort of support that they might need moving forward. So there will always be people that we don't capture, that we can't risk stratify, and they will be approached in a crisis way. But as you indicated, a lot of people, you know, they gradually, their circumstances gradually deteriorate. And if they get known to our system partners, we can identify them earlier and offer them support at an earlier stage.
Thank you. Okay, I've got Councillor Timmins, then Flynn, and then Hartbrook. Again, please indicate if anyone else got any questions. Councillor Timmins, please.
Thank you, Chair. Given that all the facts seems to have already been cut from the council, I think looking at the ways of working, so the organisational effectiveness, the prevention that we've gone through is absolutely the right way to go. But the report does indicate, and so did the presentation, that much of this we're still working through the finer detail on. Not everything's baked in. So in that context, I'm just wondering how much of this work is planned in to the budget for next year and in terms of the medium-term financial strategy. And second short point, just in terms of general reserves, if in the event that next year we underspent, I know that might be a big ambition, but if we did, would we then use that to put back into the reserves? Because I just feel it's important that we can get to a much better position within that as soon as we can.
I'll take the first one. I can probably answer the second one very quickly. I think Victoria would say yes. But in terms of the organisational effectiveness, as you say, we have made a lot of reductions over recent years, but we recognise that we can probably be even more productive, especially with, as we've mentioned earlier, further use of digital automation, improving digital skills, making sure we've got colleagues in work and being able to do their best. In terms of the figure that is baked in, it will be between 9 and 10 million. It was just over 10 in December. We're just doing some final workings out. It may well be just under 10 in the February papers, but we're just working that stuff out. Andy's had a couple of workshops with trade unions. We've had a workshop with colleagues. And so we are developing that programme as we speak. It's really live. So we haven't got absolutely every line of where each budget saving will be made across the organisation. That is going to take a little bit longer, but we still believe this is the right approach to enable our financial sustainability rather than rushing at it. And what we're looking with both of these programmes and indeed the other two, is that over time they will increase further opportunities for savings, and we'll get some momentum behind them, and that's what will help narrow the gap in the second 2 years of the savings proposals.
Just to add something quickly there as Chair, I think I certainly agree that it's the right approach, makes a lot of sense to me. We've talked in previous meetings and in our Chair's briefing about how we as a board can stay updated, because we recognise that it's not a sort of all detailed up front and done sort of approach. We do have a financial health monitoring, but that can be a little bit lagging. So I wonder if you could just briefly describe how we could be kept up to date as a board in a more qualitative way, I suppose, or more regularly.
Yeah, really happy to do that. And we can think about what the right frequency would be. But, you know, there'll be, as we get into the programme, there'll be highlight reports again for both mine and for Caroline's and in time the other two programmes as well. So it would be for us to bring those to scrutiny. My gut feel says about quarterly. But yeah, I think we need to get into it and see what would help members most in terms of fulfilling their role. But it would be activity based as well as savings based. So it would be, are we doing the work to deliver the savings? That's what would be the difference. And if we look back, you know, the scrutiny board's informed the organisational plan pretty frequently anyway. So I think it would be a continuation of that approach.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I think that makes sense, and it's easier for us to engage with activity stuff in a way than it is. So I have Councillors Flynn and Hartbrook. So Councillor Flynn, please.
Thank you very much indeed. A couple of questions on the current year and next year. We're forecasting an overspend of 28 million, but that's effectively being taken care of by the strategic fund. The overspend, the actual overspend projected by Children and Families and Adult Health is over 52 million. Note that the strategic reserve, though the strategic contingency reserve has almost gone. The social care reserve has gone. The general fund is shown reserves, this is, of about 36.5 million. I wonder how confident you are that that figure will be retained by the end of the year. Next year, note that the demand pressures are around about 66 million, most of which again are adults and health and children and families. And given how poor forecasting has been in past years, for instance, at the last budget, next year's overspend was calculated at 38 million, and within 3 months it got up to over 100 million. Children looked after. Does anyone have a figure of the cost of internal care as opposed to the external care, which is very expensive? And last one is, when are we going to see a copy of the council plan?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, we have recognised the pressures that we've experienced in this financial year in the budget, and that's why, as I said, in adults and health and children's and families, we have incorporated 52 million into adults and health and children's and families, around 26 million. What I would say is that the financial forecasting has been very complex, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, that it is really difficult at the moment because of the numbers of people who require our support, which has changed off on previous years. So those trends are not taking the same trajectory that we'd seen in previous years. Also, the complexity of those people that are presenting themselves has increased. And this is a national issue. It's not something just that Leeds experiencing. All local authorities are seeing this trend change, and therefore are reporting overspends in those directorates. What we have done is looked at the forecasting that's undertaken and revised that over the 3 years so that we can make the budget more sustainable for the future, but that does have the detriment that we need to find savings because we only have an envelope of funding to be able to fund the services, which is why the new programmes are in place. What I would say about the level of the reserves that we've got in place, we are going to have to utilise them in this financial year. However, we've recognised that when we've done the budget and over the medium-term financial strategy, we are replenishing them. So there will be reserves available in the strategic contingency and the social care reserve for next year and the next few years as we really refine that forecasting so that it is for unforeseen and not for things that have happened because we've not delivered on savings. And that's the same with the general fund balances. We will be using some of them this year. However, we've built into the budget repayments of 9 million next year so that we start to replenish those general fund balances and see those come through. But it is very complex. It's not straightforward. I wouldn't say it's from poor forecasting. I would say that it's because of the complexities and the changes that we are seeing that's meaning that it is challenging. When we set the budget, we over the last few years, made the decision to show 3 years budgets when we were doing them so that people could see what was in on the horizon coming towards the council for those next 2 years. When we do that, we're looking at over 18 months in advance. And the trends that we saw through last winter, and we're seeing the changes in the trends this year, take time to catch up in the budget process. So therefore, that's why we always caveat it and say there is a lot of work that still needs to be undertaken on the budgets for it's not the next year, it's the year after's budget through the summer, which is what we do. So trying to forecast that in advance with all the complexities that we're seeing is really difficult. And therefore, that's why we always caveat it and say, this is so far in advance, we're giving you an estimate, but we really refine it through the spring and the summer. I think those were the main questions. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add on the forecasting, I think we've made sure that in all the exec board papers, which do also come here, that the graphs have been really, we've been as transparent as we possibly can with all the information we've got, demonstrating why the trends aren't going as we want them to go. And obviously we'll be very happy to keep bringing those back to scrutiny as well. And just answering the question about council plan, it'll be in the February board papers. It'll be an updated draft from the one that was in the December board papers and the one from September, where we outlined what the approach would be. So the updated version will be in February's board papers.
February will be a big month for us. Any follow-ups to that, Councillor Flynn?
Sorry, Councillor Flynn, can you ask that?
Yes, it's not really yours, Caroline, but as you're in charge of the prevention programme, the cost of external care for CLAs is horrendous. Around about, I think, an average of £4,500 a week. Is there any idea of how much the internal care these children are being brought back into Leeds, what the cost of those will be, what the average saving will be?
I'm going to have to ask Victoria to answer that question because I don't have that level of detail for the children's services. Sorry, Victoria.
No, that's fine. So the average cost of an external residential is about £6,500, where for an internal residential it's about £2,500 per week. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I've got Councillor Hartbrook and then Blackburn and then a very quick question from Councillor Parnham, and then we'll draw the item to a close.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, the question from Councillor Flynn and Victoria's last answer fits nicely into where I'm going with questions. So I've got two questions, if that's okay. So Councillor Flynn touched on demand-led risks. The question I've got is around initiative deployment risks, i.e. the stuff we're going to do to sort of fix our internal in-house things, such as moving to cheaper in-house solutions rather than external, and the pace and the risk and how we monitor that we're on track to deliver those savings and whether those savings are aspirational enough. And there were a couple of savings, and this isn't everything that I could, but there were a couple that stood out to me. One, savings on staffing some of the high profile roles that are going to be either left to wither on the vine or not recruited or made redundant. What organisational risk is there in terms of loss of experience or leadership capacity, and whether that could expose us to so-and-so GO20 risk? And if there isn't any operational risk to that, then why were these roles allowed to kind of exist for so long? And then on the home and payments is kind of the risk around the delivery of revised, more cost-effective, perhaps more in-house systems. And then the second question I've got, which is unrelated really, is I saw on the deck that rent and service charges are going up 4.8%. On the same slide, actually, which kind of makes the argument, wages are going up 3.5% for affected staff. A quick search shows that 25-26, universal credits going up 1.7%, and pensions are going up 4.1%. So when considering a large number of our residents are kind of, in the jam category, just about managing, how do we kind of justify pushing up rents and service charges ahead of where residents' incomes are keeping pace with?
I'll take the first one, although I think I actually captured 3 questions in there, but I'll try and do my best on that one. So just to begin with about kind of deployment risks and I guess implementation, where, as you know, we have had some delays, for example, on, we didn't get our in-house provision going as quickly as we wanted to, but it is up and running now and the pace has increased. These things are quite hard, complex things to do, as we've mentioned before at the board. And likewise, with prevention and organisational effectiveness, there are risks built into the programme, but we will be doing our level best to make sure we've got the right capacity and capability to implement those. The option, I guess, is that we don't do that and we still go with our directorate approach. But I think everybody is convinced that that isn't going to enable our financial sustainability. So on balance, we think the risks are our risk appetite is to go for the prize of cross-council approaches and make sure we implement it with really clear roles and responsibilities. I think you asked about kind of the risk of, loss of experienced staff. I guess staffing is and Andy might want to come in on this, but you're putting roles under continuous review in a way. So I don't think it's as easy as kind of saying, right, well, we don't need that one anymore, therefore we didn't need it 3 years ago. I think it is more we're continually looking at how much money we've got, what business we've got to be delivered, what roles we need, and changing our staffing according to that. And in doing so, managing business continuity as we go, where we do lose roles because we need to live within our budget. And I think, all the directors make sure we're doing that and that we minimise risks. I think they were the questions other than the rent one. Has that answered them?
Just on the rent ones, I haven't got the detail, but what I understand is that on the HRA, the government rent formula assumes CPI plus 1%. That doesn't mitigate people's ability to pay, but the majority of those people who are in council houses receive housing benefit, and the benefit would increase in line with their rent requirements. I think it is a high percentage that do receive housing benefit.
Just one observation. I was actually going to put this in the question, but I thought it might make answering it too easy. One thing that might help is because obviously inflation has been jumping all over the place a lot the last sort of 4 years. We had a particular spike in 22, 23, and I did wonder whether, if you tracked kind of the multi-year effect, whether that might, of how benefits have gone up, whether it was a lag effect that could be partly explaining it. But I think because obviously you put up 1 year's figures, but you haven't put up anything around where we'd been previously. And obviously a 1 year increase of 4.8% is one thing, but if it was 4.8% the year before, or if it was 10% the year before, that also has a bearing in terms of how affordability tracks over a span of time.
It does. We tend to go with CPI increases plus 1%, which is so it's where CPI has been in September, and that dictates what the increase will be going forward.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Blackburn, then Parnham, and then
I think some of my question, or most of my question, were covered by Councillor Hart.
Very efficient. I like that. Thank you. Councillor Parnham, you got a quick final question?
Okay. Question on service charge. Can we possibly bring in-house communal cleaning back into the council? Because we've got a lot of residents in the 14 blocks that are full in Armley Ward who complain about the cleaning in communal areas. But it's a plea really to HR. We've got a fantastic Armley housing office, but they don't have a manager. We've been without a manager for quite a while now. So a plea for that to be filled if possible. And very finally, I don't work for Costco, but I used to, and I fill up at 117.9 a litre. I noticed there's a thing here about fuel. What's our contract regarding fuel? Do we have a fleet contract, or is it ad hoc? How do we go about that?
So I can't comment on Community House about bringing it back in-house. That I'd have to go back to the directorate to consider that, and the housing officer at Armley, but we can take that back. and ask the question. On the fuel, we have a contract for fuel across the council that has been out to tender, and that's where the contract that we pull off on around fuel. But I can get you further details on that.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, did you want to come in at this point?
Thank you, Chair, and can I thank members for their questions this morning as well about the budget and the finance monitoring report. I just want to, at this stage, pay tribute to the finance officers, so Victoria and her team, for working their way through what Victoria describes as complex, but unbelievably complex this year, I have to say, with all the changes that have come about due to an incoming government changing the formula for how local authorities are funded finally. But it has meant more work for finance officers to really get under the detail of it, to be sure about where that money can be used and what for. So thank you, Victoria, and please take back to your whole team about that work. I know that has been work through the night and weekends. So I hope when we do get to the budget that some of you do take some time out in annual leave to recover and recuperate from all that work as well, I've got to say. Just a couple of points from me, if I may, Chair, and particularly hearing about the questions around rent increases. I think it's important to inform Scrutiny Board members that actually rental income pays for our capital programme in our stock and in our new build growth programme as well. So without rental income, we wouldn't be able to deliver as much capital programme in the existing stock, which we know needs some investment in to bring it into line with different decency standards and so on, but also in our new build programme that we've got as well. So just to bear in mind that when we're thinking about increase in rental charges, and service charges are brought into a break-even point. It's not that it's what those services cost us to deliver that we're trying to get to the point of covering those in those increases as well. It's not necessarily that we want to just raise them for the sake of raising them in terms of service charge. And I know that's not what Councillor Hartbrook meant. I just wanted to make those points about the rental income. And in terms of keeping Scrutiny Board updated with the finance reports, I think there has been a big change this year in the way that we've brought our reports to Scrutiny Board. You have often seen it before. Exec Board have seen the financial monitoring report. I've been really open about what's coming down the line at us in terms of overspends and the way that demand has come at us through social care this year as well. And I hope that continues. In Exec Board, we take a report every executive board, and that monitoring report has all the detail in it about the savings as well that have been made throughout the year and how progress has gone on them. And let's not forget, while we've discussed next year's budget, that actually directorates have been delivering savings throughout this year, significant savings that have ensured that we've been able to withstand the overspend that we've seen in social care due to the demand that's been coming through our door. So I just wanted to make those few points, Chair, and happy to keep bringing these reports to you as often as Scrutiny Board would like them, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And just before we come into recommendations, I'm sure all the board will agree with me that we are very thankful for all the work done by officers on the budget. It's a massive piece of work with a lot of iterations. So I'll echo Councillor Cooper's thanks there as well on behalf of the board. And just as ask members, are you happy with the recommendations contained
in the report today? Okay. In that case, we will take a 2-minute comfort break and then move on to the next item.
Okay, thank you everybody. We are going to get started with our next item now, which is the performance report with Tim and Mariana leading, I believe. Please, time for presentation.
I think just by way of introduction, Chair, this is obviously a regular report that comes to Scrutiny Board, and the respective indicators go to the respective Scrutiny Board twice a year. It's got a series of dashboards in it, some commentary. We try and pull out the highlights and the lowlights, in terms of telling you what we're doing about those things. Tim will run through it with a presentation. We have got Richard here from a complaints perspective. We thought members might want to dive into that a little bit, but I would say it needs to be appropriate to strategy and resources scrutiny, and not too much into service issues. And actually, we've got colleagues from HR as well, but we've also got the Be Well at Work item later, so we might want to kind of parcel those into there. So Tim will just cover the presentation quickly. Thanks.
Yes, good morning. This is our regular performance report. The report highlights the current challenges for the portfolio areas that this board has responsibility for. So the key things really are the staff sickness rate, which there's a lot of work going on for that, the results of the staff survey that was undertaken last year, complaints performance, and also increase in demand in things like freedom of information, subject access requests. We're also transitioning to a new payroll system and a new finance system, and the report brings out a little bit more around the impact on performance of that. Earlier on we mentioned the new council plan that's in development and going to board next month, and one of the key things that we like to do is we like to make sure that we have our finger on the pulse of these new plans, and so when that plan is implemented we'll be reviewing the performance indicators to make sure that we're still measuring all the right things. Right at the very end of the performance report, there's a little bit around the local government outcome frameworks, and that's a set of performance indicators that central government are quite keen local authorities measure. A lot of that work is still in progress and an update is due. So again, when that set of centralised performance indicators is released, we'll be looking at that and making sure that we're doing what we need to do in terms of measuring performance, and no doubt that will help facilitate some national comparisons. So moving on to strategy and resources functions, obviously the report covers the areas of human resources, financial services, customer relations, information management, governance, and procurement and commercial services. And as well as reporting to strategy and resources leadership team, these indicators are part of a bigger suite that go to corporate leadership team, and executive board members are also provided with a copy of the results after CLT clearance. So we're quite open and transparent with all this. So quickly summarising the key points from those areas. Human resources, obviously sickness is a sort of key issue that members will recall from previous reports. And I'm aware, as Mariana mentioned, we've got the Be Well at Work report that's coming up after this. So it might be that in order for us not to steal HR's thunder, listen to the Be Well at Work report first, and then that might answer some of the questions. So things around sickness might be better tabled at that report. Last year, and although many of the results were broadly similar to previous years, including the response rate, probably the key one to pick out there is the percentage of staff who agree that there are opportunities to progress their career. And this has fallen from 54% to 47%. And no doubt the work that we're doing on the service planning and the new council plan will help to address this. But again, colleagues from HR will be able to provide more information around that. The next area is financial services, and obviously we measure the performance against the budget there, and we've also just had the report there, so we've had quite a lot of detail provided on that. But we also look at things like income collection rates, which are showing a slight dip, but are considered broadly sustainable. Moving on to areas of customer relations, again, this remains a challenging position, and particularly around the results for children and families and SEND. And I'm aware that although this is that particular area is more for children and families scrutiny board, we do report SEND and EHCP position to executive board regularly. And I'm aware there's another report going next month. It's not been published yet, though. In terms of information management governance, again, we've talked about an increase in demand in other areas of the council and the impact that it's had. Well, that also has impacted on the number of requests for information received. And that's been quite challenging. Big increases in demand, which made it difficult to turn some of this round within the timescales. But I'm aware that the team is working on further tools and digitisation to help with that workload, and that is currently work in progress. Finally, moving on to the area of procurement and commercial services, and again, there's been a bit of an impact from some of the new system here, and as part of the new council plan that's going to come in, this will be an area that we'll look at in terms of how we can carry on reporting the procurement results that we need to, and we'll be working with the procurement team to do that. I'm aware that the issues have been flagged up with the system architect. So again, I think that's something that's currently work in progress, and hopefully we can then get backdated historical results so we can still see where we are with all this. So I'll take the pause there, and we're happy to answer questions on the performance results.
Thank you. Just very briefly, the new finance and operation system, I feel like I have some questions about that, but it's not really about this report. So I'm going to formulate some thoughts on that and perhaps ask those separately. And if members have any as well, let me know. I've got a very eager questioner in Councillor Hamilton and Buckley and Blackburn. Anybody else want to raise their hand at this point? No. Councillor Hamilton, please.
Thanks, Chair. I've got 3 or 4 questions. Right. My first question is regards to, we've seen an 8% increase in the spike of sickness. Is it concentrated in any specific area? You know, any specific service? Or is there a demographic group?
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. We do see, I think sickness is complex. I think we are a large organisation with a varied portfolio. When we look at sickness data, it is dominated by long-term sickness, and it tends to be in frontline services. And we see that for many reasons, the demographic, ageing workforce, manual handling. When we look at the data, we're looking at mental health, and we're looking at musculoskeletal, and we're looking at hospital stays.
Okay. Yes. Complaint handling performance. Overall, good performance, but the children and family, which is lagging behind. What are the root cause for missing timescale in children and families? Is it, for example, workload, staffing, etc.? And I'll ask my other one. Are complainants receiving sufficient handling communication when timescales are slipping?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer those 2 questions. In terms of the delays around complaints within children and families, sort of whilst it's still sort of something that's being considered, sort of different scrutiny board, it is sort of capacity and sort of staffing pressures within the services, workloads compared to people able to sort of complete those sort of complaints. And carry out investigation and provide responses, something that's pressured, which is the cause of those delays in responses that are referenced in the report. Where customers are not receiving response to complaints in timescale, it's part of our complaint policy that we'll provide updates to those complainants to keep them abreast of what's happening, and we know what the altered or adjusted timescales are if something's going to be late. So people should be kept updated where a complaint will not be received or a complaint response will not be received in timescale.
No, just we're going to ask, Chair, if we could ask for have a bit more deep dive into the complaint reform and customer experience, in children and families. I'm sure it'll be on the other scrutiny board, but it's come here, so I think we should also get that, and any internal progression and equity of opportunities.
Thank you. Yeah, I will speak to Councillor Flynn about that if you're interested about how we could work together on that one, because I agree it's important. I've got Councillor Buckley and Blackburn.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to take up this sickness absence item, please. It seems to me that the rate of absence is about double that in the private sector, which is appalling. And the council taxpayers of Leeds would be entitled to think that people are taking them for a ride. Because if it's double the rate in the private sector, assuming that a virus hasn't descended entirely on the city council and nowhere else, that means that half of them shouldn't be off sick at all. And this constant harping on about mental health, depression, and all this kind of thing has got beyond a joke, in my view.
Is your question why is the rate higher? Council than
My question actually is that surely, rather than needing more HR staff, we actually need more departmental managers who are prepared to do the work, which is very difficult, as opposed to just the fluffy stuff.
There was a lot of commentary in there, I think it's fair to say, but the question in there I think is probably, would we be better off with, is it the new HR staff that we need or is it something else? So could someone answer that? Who's best placed to?
Sorry, Chair, for intervening. I just think that we've got a whole other item coming straight after that discusses all of this. And I just wonder whether we can park. I accept Councillor Buckley, making his comments and his questions, absolutely fine. But I wonder whether we can have it in part of that item that's the Be Well at Work, that's all about sickness, absence, and how we can maybe change some of that as well. And it may be more relevant than at the performance report. I do think Tim mentioned that at the beginning when he was introducing his report as well. But it's up to you, Chair, when you want to take the questions.
Sorry, Councillor Blackburn, did you have something to say there?
Oh, I've got a question on the sickness, but I've got to say an answer to that I want before we get on to the next one, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, it's a bit we're operating in vague terms here, but if Councillor Buckley's question about basically what's the most appropriate way to bring down sickness, etc., is addressed in a new presentation, perhaps you could say so, and would you be happy for then that to be asked? Yeah. Do you think that his question is addressed by your next item?
Yes, although I'm happy to answer it now also.
I think if it's addressed by the next item, we can probably wait, if that's all right with you. But it looks like Councillor Buckley's okay with that.
Thank you.
Most important thing is to get the answer, isn't it? So, Councillor Blackburn.
Well, I'll stop being mysterious. What I was going to ask is, it's all right getting these figures and doing it across department, but we have lots of different jobs within those departments, and some of them are quite physical, and some of them out there. And the other thing that's not shown in the figures we get is the difference between those that are long-term sick and those that are, you have every other Monday off or day after the football match or whatever, them kind of things. And I used to keep, in private sector, the firm I worked with, I worked in production control. And you might ask why are we doing that? Because what we had to do, it were a number of hours of work compared to how much production we got that we were looking at. And I used to keep that, but I had to sort of define the difference between those that couldn't work. You know, somebody's broke the leg. If they work on bins and you break your leg, you can't empty bins, can you? You know, that sort of thing. That kind of thing. Or somebody had an heart attack. I used to have to define the difference between them and ordinary everyday sickness, and also take account of those that are doing different jobs. Are we doing that? That's one question. And the other thing about the complaints rising, and I'll just go from my own experience of what I've seen through casework, is that I often find you can't get older people as you used to do. Do you think the complaints are rising because of that, because of the staff have moved on or changed, and we're not getting the same service back that we used to get?
Just to say, I think the question about the different types of sickness is actually in the papers. Perhaps it doesn't distinguish as much between types of jobs as you're after, but the type of sickness is catered for in the papers. But yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I think I can answer that because Councillor Blackburn, you mentioned private sector. It's probably more appropriate and value adding if I bring both of those questions together from Councillor Flynn also. We have done some benchmarking using core cities, NHS and our anchor partners and anchor groups. We are in the middle. We're not an outlier either end. However, I think the future work we're doing here within Leeds City Council is about looking at what we're doing and getting our own house in shape. I don't want us to compare apples with pears. I want us to make sure we've got lots of common factors so that we can be our best. With regards to the relationship between the private sector and the public sector, I think it's important to understand that sickness is nuanced. It is incredibly complex. We need to take our time, although fast and further, we need to take our times to get the foundations right. We need to be evidence-based, data-driven and values-led, because we do have people at the core of everything we do. Recognising the diversity of our workforce, frontline workers who have very challenging jobs, we need to ensure that they are fully supported always and that we are always doing the right thing. We need to ensure that we support our managers so that they have the right confidence and competence to make the right choices and decisions. And we need to recognise that our workforce and the diversity and demographic of that is not the same as the private sector. All of that work and understanding will be encapsulated within the Be Well at Work attendance strategy and framework that I will touch upon later on in the next item. Patterns and trends of short-term sickness have trigger points, and our trigger points encapsulate both those trends and patterns, referring to a Monday off situation alongside our longer term sickness. It is all captured and it is all monitored, and we work very hard with our managers so that they can manage it. The work we will do moving forward will strengthen that support to ensure that we are reacting and responding and preventing in a managed and appropriate and professional way.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more questions on this item before we move on to the Be Well at Work item, which I think we're all eager to? Okay, in that case, are members happy with the recommendation? It's quite a simple one in the report. Yeah, okay, lovely. I propose that we move straight on to the Be Well at Work programme report item, which is led by Lisa and Emma. So, yeah, please do get started.
Thank you, Chair. This paper provides an update on Be Well at Work, a programme for us that supports our council plan and is a key part of our organisational effectiveness programme. This programme is a demonstration of our cultural maturity within the health, safety and wellbeing space. Looking back and reflecting, I was with you in June 2024 to talk about the framework and how we wanted to bring wellbeing into a more governance and assured space so that we can make consistent progress. And we wanted to do that by bringing it onto an HSG health and safety executive framework with health and safety. And now that is now fire management as well. That has worked, and we have laid some really strong and robust foundations, not only from a corporate perspective, but also within services. So this is a really, really good news story when we look at how we are managing this space and our risk, preventing, supporting and promoting wellbeing across all our services. It shows progress that we've already made within the corporate space and across our services. Most importantly, how we are moving forward to a consistent and preventative framework to support colleagues to be well at work and deliver for our city. I'm going to share with you now a few slides that bring that to life and highlight what this looks like in practice. So our first slide here is really agenda with what I'm going to cover. The Be Well at Work programme, which I've touched on a second ago, some examples of our in-service wellbeing and mental health activities, and some of our corporate-led progress against some council-wide actions. Okay, this is our roadmap. I think the first thing to share here, just to give us a fresh start, is we recently had the staff survey, as you know, and it was very reassuring to hear that 76% of colleagues told us that they feel well supported around their health, safety and wellbeing at work. You can see from the journey here that the Be Well at Work programme represents the next phase in our ongoing efforts led by the corporate team. It brings together health, safety and wellbeing and mental health into a very clear people-centred framework. This is about moving from multiple strong offers and initiatives to a consistent single way of supporting colleagues through their employment journey with us. So, what does that look like? We want to ensure that next slide please, Rob. We would like to ensure that when colleagues choose to come and work here at Leeds City Council, they get a warm welcome. Starting well, building safety, belonging and confidence from day one. We want to ensure that new colleagues feel safe, welcome and supported from the moment they join. Laying the foundations for their well-being, confidence and a strong sense of belonging within Team Leeds. And each of the sections through their journey, each of those stages are based on 4 elements. Getting leadership and culture right, creating a good, positive first impression that really reflects what we're about and how we do things around here. The second is health support, ensuring that we have a health awareness and positive habits from the very beginning. Safety support, embedding a culture of safety and responsibility, in particular within those frontline roles we mentioned earlier. Wellbeing and organisational support, building a really strong connection, a sense of belonging and confidence in our supportive environment. The second phase of a colleague's life, I'm hoping, is they're doing well. They've got purpose, they know what's expected of them, and they are progressing. They are thriving at work, balancing growth, well-being and achievement. And that is in place to ensure that colleagues feel supported to thrive and navigate their careers here at Leeds City Council. Sometimes, though, we know that colleagues do come to work and they do contribute, but they do have more complex situations in their life. They may have caring responsibilities, they may have anxiety, other things and other elements that mean we need to just stop and reflect and ensure we're giving them the right support they need to stay and contribute, to ensure every colleague who is at work, regardless of their personal circumstance or challenges, receives the right level of care, flexibility and support to remain in the right place, doing the right things, being part of Team Leeds. However, we know that sometimes colleagues are not well enough to be in work and contributing. And this is when we touch on that attendance element, which I know is a big challenge for us, but I know that it's a challenge I'm confident we are tackling at the moment. Sometimes we all need time to recover. Through Be Well at Work and our partnerships with the HR attendance team, we make sure that every colleague feels supported, understood, and empowered to return to work safely and with confidence, because being well and doing well work hand in hand here at Leeds City Council. Supporting colleagues later in their career. This is a crucial element for us. We support colleagues in later career and pre-retirement to maintain dignity, well-being and contribution approaching the later stages of their careers, aligned with our Marmot principles and healthy ageing, fair work and inclusion. This is about saying thank you, treating colleagues with respect, understanding that life changes and has cycles, yet really enabling colleagues to be part still of that very warm welcome they experienced. We also understand that colleagues do move on, and we want to value every transition to ensure colleagues feel respected, supported and valued as they leave our organisation, recognising that even when we part ways, we reflect how we behave reflects our culture. And one of the things when we speak about this, I'm always aware of is lots of colleagues leave Leeds City Council and go on to huge promotions. Lots of colleagues go into our city and have amazing jobs and add amazing value. I don't want to see this element as necessarily a negative, because there's lots of really, really positive news stories here. And I reflect upon my own team. I've had members of my team who have gone and taken up senior roles within the health and safety executive. I've had senior colleagues who have gone into promotions within other local authorities. This part for me is when other organisations across our city are recruiting, if a candidate has been at Leeds City Council, I want there to be a level of assurance that that person has come from somewhere good. Next slide, please, Rob. Okay. There is this inevitable phase, and I know that this is a hot potato for everybody at the moment, and I know that it is a top priority for Mariana, Andy and myself. Supporting colleagues who are too unwell to be in work. Sometimes we all need to recover, we know this, but getting it right is absolutely key for us. There is a lot of work going on within this space at the moment, and there's a lot of activity underway. Attendance is complex. The costs associated with it are complex, whether that's agency costs, performance, colleague shared pressure and load. We know that we need to go further and faster. We need to be evidence-based, data-driven and values-led. I will touch on this again a little bit later on, but I'd really like to share some good practice with you now, if I may. Looking at our in-service work, colleagues tell us that well-being is a live and active conversation within our workplace. From well-being days and peer support groups to financial well-being and mental health activity. What's really encouraging for us is that colleagues genuinely tell us that managers are paying attention and managers do care, and we're hearing that through our staff survey results. But also not only through that, we're hearing it when we're out and about and we're chatting to colleagues too as part of our audits. It's a live conversation, not just an initiative. We haven't curated this slide. This slide has come from in-service colleagues. Then when we look at our corporate, next slide please, Rob. When we look at our corporate-led council-wide actions, alongside our local activity, we've strengthened our corporate action. This includes clearer expectations of our managers, better training. We've got a Be Well at Work, health, safety, well-being training package, really well attended and great feedback from it. Better training and support, a growing well-being champion network and improved access to occupational health and counselling. This for me is about consistency and capability, setting people up for success regardless of their role. Then we move on to assessing impact of wellbeing at work. When I look back to 3 years ago and wellbeing wasn't on the framework, sometimes it can seem and appear a little bit woolly. In order to have consistent support, we needed to bring that into a clearer management and governance structure, and doing that for me was the right thing. And I have seen positive outcomes as a result of that. Leadership, governance, policy, corporate risk and assurance are absolutely vital for the work that we deliver. Within the corporate team, we've seen Be Well at Work audits. All our directorates have now been audited, and we are going into children's and families over the coming months. We've strengthened our reporting at all levels. We have an online management system for accidents being procured and looking at occupational health also. We have a new standard for managing computer-related risks. We're strengthening and expanding our policies and procedures and toolkits so that managers and colleagues have information that's correct, simple and easy on hand for them. A big priority for us is violence and aggression, and I will come back to you soon with a paper on violence and aggression. There's a lot of work going on within that space, and it does form a part of our frontline colleagues' daily life. So we are absolutely working on that, and I will come back and share some of the information on that with you. Lots and lots of good work taking place. When we look at in-service, the corporate team are supporting risk profiles, strengthening those into action plans, RAG rating them, going back out, looking for progress, looking for updates and ensuring we've got accountability. Annual work-related inspections, they will launch again in February, March time. Again, violence and aggression DSE part of our Be Well at Work programme. And we've got lots of initiatives building a handbook for managers and staff as well within that space. And we will continue to develop our competency, compliance and consistency. I'm just going to go back, if I may, to slide 6, I think it is, which is supporting colleagues too unwell to be in work. As I said, attendance is complex. Through the Be Well at Work programme, colleagues from HR, occupational health and our improving attendance team are working much more closely and in partnership together to ensure that we have earlier, more structured and more consistent support for both colleagues and managers. There's a strong focus on improving the quality of conversations during absence, strengthening occupational health input. Over the coming weeks, we will be building an occupational health strategy around attendance, accepting that what we've done before, we need to do differently. It needs to be more nuanced and much more focused. We want to make better use of data so that we're starting to support a timely and proportionate return to work when it's appropriate. For me, this is about supporting recovery, enabling safe and sustainable returns to work with confident and safe space conversations, and maintaining that connection and dignity throughout absence. Again, I've said it many times before, absence and sickness and agency all going hand in hand with culture. It's really important to share with you that it is a broader and complex area in its own right. I am working with Nicola, who is leading the new team, and I'm working with Emma from a wellbeing and occupational health perspective, and we will be looking to come back to you in the coming months with a paper solely on attendance. A big focus for me is getting the data right, making evidence-based decisions, and looking at how we filter that across into our services, not broad brushing it, but understanding the nuances and the complexities of our frontline workforce. I can't do that in a day. I just need a little bit of time to go away with this amazing new task force. We've been really lucky to have an investor save case for that. And we are, please rest assured, absolutely on this space at the moment. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And we discussed that we would be having the attendance focused paper come to us as a board later, which I think will be gratefully received by the board. So I have got questions from councillors Hartbrook, Hamilton, Timmins and Martin. Anyone else want to indicate at this point? Arnhem? Yeah, lovely. So councillor Hartbrook first, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentation. I have to say that what you said in your summing up there was actually better than I thought than what was in the slides, because the slides, if you look at the headline statistics, unless somebody, we either need to have an understanding of why there isn't a problem, but empirically and looking at kind of Occam's razor of simple, our absenteeism, depending on which numbers you take, because they're slightly different between page 184 and 185 of the agenda pack, between 13.86 and 14.3 in latest stats. We're not, you said about going further and faster. If anything, we're going backwards compared with 5 years ago. And there's nothing in this deck that addresses that. So I think everybody in this room, I would hope, supporting people who are genuinely ill and genuinely sick. And, we are a caring, compassionate employer. But the gap between the statistics that our council have, and I will really welcome what you said around fixing Leeds, not looking too far across. That was good. That was really good to hear. And I also, when this last came up as an agenda item, I saw that actually you're right. As far as other local authorities concerned, we're not particularly an outlier, which leads me to think, but compared with other industries, whether it be prisons, schools, other frontline services, local authorities, for whatever reason, often are. And I'd welcome more. And you touched on it right as you were summing up around what we can do. So I'd just like some assurance that, yes, of course, what's in this deck around supporting people who are sick and creating a positive, supportive, nurturing environment for people to work in is good. But actually, for the council taxpayers of Leeds who need services delivering, I'd like to see a little bit more in the next deck around what specific targets we're aiming in terms of, making sure, because it's around making sure that people are fit, are supported when they're ill, but it's also, around making sure that people are available to work when they can be. And I think, it was touched on. You touched on it a little bit around that kind of not judging, but actually empirically measuring to say, well, long term, if you're not available, then there is a process that has to be taken down. So just, any comments?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I'll answer this one. I think the first thing to say is that we're fairly early on in that journey. So you are absolutely right to ask the question about the evidence and the direction of travel. So as Lisa says, fairly early on in this new way of working, which is focused very much on that system-wide end-to-end process, trying to focus very much on faster, the pace that Lisa rightly mentioned, and the issue of consistency. I think just in terms of the outcomes and the financial outcomes that you rightly referenced, as Lisa briefly mentioned, although we will come back to in more detail, some key priorities for us at the moment, which we have alluded to already. So the first issue is really focusing on the long-term sickness cases, because that's often where the cost is. So we're really having a very deliberate focus on those very specific cases. We've also touched on understanding reasons for sickness. So previously we talked about some of the very specific problems in certain services. Perhaps they have musculoskeletal issues because of the demographic of the workforce or the nature of the job that they do. So it's targeting and focusing on those. I think the third thing which Councillor Buckley asked earlier is this issue about the role managers play. So we're absolutely certain and absolutely confident that the focus on this has to be building the role line managers play in management of sickness absence. It can't be an issue that's outsourced to Lisa and her team. Our managers must get to grip with this, but we're here to help them and guide them and build that support and confidence over time. But to do it in that broader model that Lisa's described in terms of that Be Well approach, so touching on that whole system-wide issue. And I think perhaps the final thing I would say is really understanding and focusing on those areas of high spend. So again, you rightly raised about the issue about taxpayers' money. So we are focused and determined to go where it costs us the most. So again, Lisa did talk about focusing our efforts on those areas where when people are off sick, we immediately incur overtime or agency costs. So the idea is to focus on those areas immediately. So we'll be able to come back quite quickly to actually report a very explicit return on that investment that we're now making. Thank you.
I know you've got a quick follow-up just to say as well, perhaps the kind of questions that we note in this session could be shared with Lisa and team to bear in mind for the report that they bring to us. So follow up from Albert.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, the granularity, I think, has been touched on by a number of members. The question I had as a quick follow-up was that when I was going through the pack, I noticed that there's been a spike of a more than doubling to 25 of 7-day riddors. Is that just a random spike, or is there any reason behind it? Because as you say, that is tracking that, and also it goes back to the understanding almost at team level where the patterns are, because there are a number of different things that can drive absence.
That is a really good question, and it's a double-edged sword. We've recently changed and improved our reporting system and increased awareness across all services. So I'm really happy to say that colleagues are reporting accidents and incidents more than they have done before. So we are naturally seeing a little bit of an increase at the moment, and we will start to see that coming down as we implement mainly the violence and aggression work. We have a dedicated violence and aggression lead, and they will be delivering some work over this next 12-month period, which is digging deep into services and looking at riddles, those specific services as well, and really focusing on accident investigation and lessons learned. That's why I think it's risen so quickly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hamilton, next, please.
Thanks, Chair. Did have a few questions, but I'll only stick to 2, really. I will email you, Lisa. And I'm still waiting for our other follow-up meeting. Right. Equality and inclusion. How are we factoring the intersectional between mental health and protective characteristics, for example, disability, race, or gender? And my next one is what we're learning from the exit interview about well-being culture and leadership, because that should give further information with regards to the well-being within the workplace, especially exit interviews.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton, and I look forward to our meeting. The first question is a really, really good one. It's one we're very aware of, and one that is part of this new way of working. In fact, Nicola and I were talking about it this morning. So looking at inclusion and protected characteristics around mental health is something we need to learn more about. So I hope that when I come back to you, I will have some more information on that. With regards to the exit interviews, I'm going to hand over to Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. It is part of the programme that was set out to do that learning and to loop into the programme that Lisa set out. We do capture some data from the exit interviews that we do, Councillor Hamilton, to capture and then feed that back. However, we are very mindful that people that leave the organisation, not everybody does have an exit interview. Sometimes they may do online, sometimes they will have a conversation with their line manager, but then it's also just making sure that all of that is fed back in, and we know we can get stronger and tighter at that process. In addition to exit interviews, of course, we do receive quite a lot of feedback from our colleagues from the staff networks and our trade unions, and they feed their learning and their experiences of working with us and managers as well. So a bit of work just to improve the exit interview take-up rate. But we do have that covered, and we'll come back with an update on progress on that in due course.
Right, yes, please, because where I sit on a couple of other boards, they use the exit interview to improve the lives of staff, because when people are leaving, they're very honest, so yes.
Thank you for that. Yeah, agreed. Very important source of information. So I've got Councillor Timmins next, then Martin, Parnham, Blackburn and Flynn. So Councillor Timmins, please.
I've got a couple of questions, but I would like to make a comment first. I think it's very dangerous for members to just dismiss mental health as something frivolous that can be beaten out of you with a stick. if you've never had an experience, either short-term or long-term, of suffering mental health, good for you. If you've never had this, you never had to support somebody who's gone through a short or long-term episode of mental health, good for you. But it's real and it has a big impact on people, and we can't just dismiss it in that way. You mentioned triggers, and it's important to recognise that people have different triggers. My trigger from working full-time in hospitality non-stop and then suddenly going into COVID, I lived in my work as well, to having nothing at all, not being able to work, not being able to do anything. That was my trigger. That was the first time in my life I'd experienced it. It's the first time I've spoken about it right now. And this is very dangerous, just to dismiss people's feelings, what's happened to them, because you don't know what they've gone through. Going on to what I'd planned to ask about, thank you for sharing the examples of what we've actually done. I can sometimes be critical that we don't get that detail outside of the strategic headlines. So thank you for that. Thank you for the effort that's gone into that. The report does focus mainly on mental health well-being, which, as you can see, I think is really important. What it doesn't touch on as much, but you have mentioned actually, is occupational health, particularly for, but not limited to, people who work in more physical roles. And I would hope that when we do discuss attendance, that maybe we could have a section on that and how we're supporting our employees with that. And also, I do believe that the work on this and the things that we do on this should also be available to elected members as well. They also have a stressful job, but I think it should encompass the whole organisation.
Thank you very much. I echo all your comments about mental health also. Thank you for sharing that. We will look at extending this. We are very much aware of members and their risks, and we do have a profile, so I'll make sure that it's linked in, but thank you very much for your feedback.
Okay, thank you. And we'll minute the point around the physical health in the paper on attendance. So Andy, you're going to come in there?
Yeah, sorry, it was just Councillor Timmins' issues about triggers, because he rightly mentioned triggers. I guess there's two types of triggers. So there's the triggers in terms of what the system helps us to trigger. So in terms of patternable sickness or long-term sickness. So we do rely on those triggers to make sure that we do capture people at the right time in the process and we don't lose people. So that can help us, but I think it's stressing that part of the process is that human contact. So those return to work conversations and conversations with either members of the attendance team or the line manager or the trade union are as important. So it's not purely led by what the system is telling us. It's really important to understand the story behind each individual period of ill health, because as you rightly say, people are unwell for lots of different reasons and usually for lots of reasons at the same time. So we try to capture both in terms of evidence-led, system-led, but also make sure we've got the human in the loop and to make sure we have the proper conversation. Thank you.
Right, I've got Councillor Martin next, please.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Just going back a few years, we did quite a lot of work on consistent branding in the organisation. And this is just a plea that we use the Leeds City Council branding. The Be Well at Work looks like we've outsourced something and it's not something that's in-house. So that's just an observation. If we don't have to use something other than Leeds City Council, can we stick with that? But having said that, the work that you're doing on simplifying online systems for managers for reporting and improving support for managers as well as staff looks good, and it's reassuring that Leeds City Council isn't an outlier. But just to echo what Councillor Hartbrook said over there, can we have I understand that it's complex, it's really complex. But nonetheless, can we have some clear, simple, easy to understand tracking of how these improvements are impacting going forward? I know, you've only just started, but so that we can clearly see over time whether these changes are having the improvements that we hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martin. The branding was done in-house by us, and I take on your comments. We like to keep everything. If we ever put a brand, we tend to put a Leeds City Council brand next to it, just so that we all have that belonging and identity. When it comes to attendance management and sickness, for many reasons, mainly my own, I like to keep it very simple. So when I come back to you, one of the things you can rest assured on is it will be very simple and very straightforward. And I think that is the best approach for anything that's very complicated and nuanced. I've already started the paper and some unpicking so that I can understand it. And I hope to deliver it in a very simple and straightforward way with very clear objectives and progress updates. Thank you.
Councillor Parnham, please, and then we've got Blackburn and Finn.
I just want to echo Councillor Timmins and thank him for his open and honest comments. I appreciate we're a really well organisation, and we've heard here a lot of times about leadership programmes and how important it is to create excellent leadership. But for me, I put leadership down as a bit of elephant in the room in this discussion about absence. So I don't want to put leaders down at all, but are we actively looking to identify poor leadership? And for that, I gave the example of clusters of sick days when in a team there's a lot of people being absent. Because for me, from my own experience, I would suggest that there is a correlation there. And secondly, I appreciate we want to create good leaders and promote good leaders, but are we removing poor leaders? And if so, how quickly is that process? That's basically my question.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parnham. I'm going to answer the first bit, and then I'm going to pass over to Andy with the last comment. There are many areas that we will drill down into, whether that's directorate level, service level, role level, team level, manager level. It would be remiss of us to not pick up that we may have a manager who has more cases than others, and not always in a negative way, but we need to understand that and offer support and guidance if needed. So for many reasons, we will definitely pick that up. And with regards managers and having great leaders, I think that's how we do things here. It's sort of in my experience, it's a narrative I hear on a daily basis. Leadership is a key element, and how we invest in our managers is very impressive. We have the Be Well at Work programme. We have the Be Your Best programme to support managers, which is a wider programme. So for me, I think we're really good and committed to that.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, just to build it, I guess there's sort of three things in my mind about the leadership and management piece. So we're very mindful that there sometimes can be a capacity issue with some of our leaders and managers. So we have to think about and address that. So that has been part of the issue of attendance management, where managers are covering lots of different roles and activities day in and day out. So if we can help them to manage their capacity so they can focus on the right things. I think there's also an issue about confidence. So we know managers sometimes need confidence building in tackling some of these individual sensitive, challenging issues. So we have a role to play there. And I guess your point is about the capability of managers. So as Lisa says, we are building that skills and functional skills to help our managers with what they need to do their job well. But like anybody in the organisation, all our senior leaders and managers have appraisals. They also have their objectives set. So just to answer your specific question, to give you some assurance, if we come across managers and leaders that are struggling to deliver those through that framework, then we do tackle those as we would anybody else. And obviously, you know, we wouldn't share openly the specific details in this forum, but just to assure you that that is the case. And we do use the appraisal and objective setting framework accordingly.
Thank you. I feel like the theme sort of so far is people we're understanding the well-being interventions, and then the desire from a board is for next time to have more specific reasons behind the sickness and attendance, and so that they can be assured that the interventions we're taking are tackling those. I think that's the impression I'm getting from what the board is raising. So I think that's really helpful. Councillor Blackburn.
First of all, I'm going to make a comment, and the question I asked earlier on, I wasn't trying to get at you, but it's the same question I probably asked about 20 years ago when I was a cabinet member at officers then, and it seems to me during that time we've always had high levels of absenteeism, whenever it's been higher than I believe it should be. But I don't think we've always dealt with it the way we could have done. And that's why I was asking about the differences, because quite clearly somebody who's ill and needs support does not want nattering. And I think sometimes in the past we have done. And the people that want chasing, that's okay. But if it's somebody who's ill, and particularly as we are now, but the question I'm going to ask was about, we've been in since 2010, like constant change. Nobody's been sure when their job's going to be there in a year's time, or what they'll be doing, or what changes they might have. Are we intervening at an earlier stage, or encouraging managers to intervene at an early stage where they see there's a possibility of a mental breakdown? Because I think that's stress is really the main thing I'm talking about.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. There are three things for me with this. It's about acting proportionately, acting professionally, and acting compassionately. And when you look at the Be Well at Work programme, it's that life, beginning to end programme so that we can be preventative. So working with managers, making sure they're competent, confident, and capable to support colleagues before we get to that tipping point. Having those really honest conversations, good one-to-ones, good performance conversations, good support conversations, so that we are not waiting for the absence to happen. We're getting ahead of the curve and helping colleagues to stay in work, right place, right people, right place, doing the right things, and being part of team leads to deliver.
Okay, does anyone else have any last questions or comments? Councillor Cooper, you'd like to come in now?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I just also want to thank Councillor Timmins for his honesty and frankness about mental health issues. And I just want to reassure Scrutiny Board members that we take very seriously mental health in this organisation and treat it the same as we would any mental well-being is as important as physical well-being to us as an organisation, and we'll continue to ensure that that's undertaken in the right way, as Lisa just said, around dealing with it. I think from the conversation and the questions that has just happened from Scrutiny Board members, it's clear that absenteeism is a priority, but it's also a priority for us. So in terms of my role as the Exec Board member, in terms of Mariana as the Director over the matter and the officers here to deal with it as well. So it is an absolute priority for us. And as Lisa said, we will be bringing a paper further to you about much more detail that you'll be able to go into question and comment around the work that we're doing. But it's really important that we tackle that rate of absenteeism and bring it down. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. That's really good to hear and a good summary. Councillor Hartbrook, I think, indicated he had a very quick question, and given that we've got time, I think I'll allow it.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's probably more due to my. I should have asked this at the time, but it's probably just Monday morning. My brain's still revving up. The question I asked earlier on about the doubling of RIDOs, and you said it was due to better reporting. It just sunk in that obviously RIDOs is a statutory requirement to report them. So is that something that we either previously we hadn't been meeting our statutory requirement, or are we? You know, what I guess what's changed, because the consequence of that sounded when I reflected on it, it sounded quite worrying. Also, wasn't quite clear from your answer. I did think this at the time. Is it that we're better at reporting, but the absence rate is still the same, or is it that we've got more absence as a consequence of? You can see what I mean. The difference between how we categorise things, but it doesn't necessarily drive more absence. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to try in a very simple way to explain that. Previously, services reported their own RIDDORs to the Health and Safety Executive, so we never we're not in a position to capture it at a corporate level. We now have a process in place where services report them to us. We do an alert, so Ed, Mariana, Andy, a director, head of service is aware of it, and that then triggers an investigation, and we then as a corporate team take responsibility to report it to the Health and Safety Executive. That ensures that they get it on time, the right information, and we report the right things. So some services were reporting unnecessarily, and quite rightly the Health and Safety Executive said, thank you so much, that's great, but we don't need to know about that. So it's just about being cleaner with our reporting. The second part of your question with absenteeism with RIDDORs, if it's a 7-day, it's obviously reported as an absenteeism. I don't think they have necessarily gone up. I think they have over this last quarter actually gone down. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll leave that item there. Really appreciate again everybody who's come to speak to us today. So we'll just finish with the recommendations before we go on to work programme and date and time of the next meeting. So if we could all stick here just for those bits. So first of all, members, the recommendations, are you happy with those? Lovely. Moving on to the next item quickly then, just for work programme. Anyone got any questions or comments on the work programme in the agenda pack? No? Lovely. So in that case, item 11, date and time of the next meeting. The next meeting of the board will take place on the 23rd of February. And there'll be a pre-meeting for all board members at 10 as per usual, and a start time of 10:30. Thank you, everybody. Yes, so just a little spoiler alert for you there. The next meeting after that will be the 30th of March. But yeah, 23rd of February for the next board meeting. Thank you, everybody.